The medieval world was full of mysteries. People lived close to nature. They saw God everywhere. But they also saw evil. Demons were a big part of that evil. They were not just stories. They were real. Demons were very real to medieval people. They were not just a metaphor for bad things. They were actual beings. They were spiritual creatures, but they could affect the physical world. This was a core belief. It shaped how people saw the world. The idea of demons came from the Bible. The main story was about fallen angels. God created angels to serve him, but some angels rebelled. Lucifer was their leader. He was the most beautiful angel, but he became proud. He challenged God. Other angels joined him. God cast them out of heaven. They fell to earth. These fallen angels became demons. They were also called devils. So demons were not created evil. They chose evil. They were once good. This was important. It meant they were smart. They had knowledge. But they used it for bad. Their purpose was to work against God. They wanted to corrupt humans. They wanted to lead souls away from salvation. There was thought to be a hierarchy among demons. Just like angels had ranks, demons were also organized. Some were more powerful than others. Lucifer, or Satan, was at the top. He was the prince of darkness. Other powerful demons were named too. Beelzebub, Asmodeus, and Mammon were some of them. These powerful demons might oversee legions of lesser ones. The demons were spiritual beings. They did not have bodies like humans, but they could take on physical forms. They could appear as animals. They might look like monstrous creatures. Sometimes they even looked like humans. They could trick people this way. They could also enter bodies. This was called possession. People believed demons had great power, but their power was not endless. God limited them. They could only do what God allowed. This was a comfort. It meant God was still in control. But it did not make demons less scary. They were still a constant threat. They were always looking for ways to harm humans. They wanted to lead them to sin. This was their main goal. They wanted to drag souls to hell. The church taught these ideas. Priests preached about demons. Art showed them as terrifying figures. And books described their nature and actions. This belief was not marginal. It was central to the medieval worldview. It explained suffering, it explained temptation, it explained why good people sometimes did bad things. The demons were behind it all. The belief in demons was not just a theological concept. It was a daily reality. People felt their presence. They thought demons were everywhere. Also, they were in the world around them. They were even in their own thoughts. Demons liked lonely places. Forests were seen as dangerous, wild, untamed lands, dark corners, abandoned buildings. These were places where demons might lurk. Travelers feared going to these areas at night. People also thought demons could be in their homes. They could hide in shadows, they could be present during times of weakness. People believed demons caused many misfortunes. Bad harvests might be blamed on them. These illnesses could be from demonic influence, accidents, fires, anything that went wrong could be seen as their work. If a cow stopped giving milk, if a child got sick, if a storm destroyed crops, these might be seen as demonic attacks. It gave an explanation for things that were hard to understand. Demons also whispered temptations. They put bad thoughts into people's minds. A person might feel greedy or angry or lustful. These feelings were not always seen as just human weakness. They could be seen as demonic suggestion. The devil was tempting you. He was trying to make you sin. This idea of diabolical temptation was very important. It meant people had to be constantly vigilant. They had to fight against evil thoughts. They had to resist desires that led to sin. This was a spiritual battle, and demons were the enemy. They would try to make you doubt your faith. They would try to make you commit sins. They would try to turn you away from God. People felt vulnerable. They were constantly under attack. Life was already hard. There were plagues, wars, famine, and on top of all that, there were invisible enemies. Enemies who wanted to steal their souls. This made life very fearful for many. The church was the main defense. It offered protection. Priests performed blessings. They taught prayers. They offered sacraments. These were seen as powerful weapons against demons. Holy water, relics of saints. The sign of the cross. These were everyday tools. People used them to ward off evil. Exorcism was also a practice. If someone was believed to be possessed by a demon, an exorcism would be performed. This involved prayers, it involved blessings, it involved calling on God to cast out the evil spirit. It was a serious ritual. It showed how real possession was believed to be. Not everyone was possessed, but the fear was always there. The idea was that demons could take over a person's body and mind. They could make them do terrible things. This was the ultimate violation. So, demons were not just figures in theological debates. They were active agents, they were part of the fabric of daily life, they brought fear, they brought temptation, and they provided an explanation for the many hardships in a difficult world. Medieval thinkers believed demons were very cunning. They were fallen angels. This meant they were intelligent beings. They were not mindless monsters. They used their intelligence for evil. Their methods were often subtle. They relied on deception, they used trickery, they created illusions, they rarely appeared openly in their true terrifying forms. One of their main strategies was temptation. They would identify a person's weaknesses, and they would exploit them. If someone was greedy, they would suggest ways to get more wealth dishonestly. If someone was proud, they would encourage vanity. They whispered these suggestions. They made them seem like the person's own ideas. It was hard to tell the difference. Possession was a major fear. This was when a demon entered a person's body. The demon would control their actions. The person would speak in strange voices. They might have unnatural strength. They might curse God. They might know things they shouldn't. The possessed person was seen as a victim, but also as a vessel for evil. This was a clear sign of direct demonic intervention. It required immediate spiritual help. Another specific form of demonic attack was through sexual temptation. These were the incubi and succubi. An incubus was a male demon. It would visit women in their sleep. It would have sexual relations with them. A succubus was a female demon. It would visit men in their sleep for the same purpose. These encounters were seen as real. They were not just dreams, they were demonic assaults. They caused shame and fear. They were also seen as a way demons could corrupt people and drain their vitality. Demonic pacts were also a significant concern. This was the idea of selling one's soul to the devil. A person might make a deal for power, or for wealth, or for knowledge. In exchange, their soul would belong to the devil after death. This was the ultimate betrayal of God. It was seen as a very serious sin. Stories of people making these pacts were common, and they served as warnings. They showed the terrible price of seeking worldly gain through evil means. Demons were thought to take on various physical forms. Sometimes they were invisible. Other times, they appeared. They might look like animals. A black dog, a cat, a snake, or a raven were common forms. These were often animals associated with evil or darkness. They could also appear as monstrous figures. They had horns, claws, wings like bats, and terrifying faces. These forms were meant to scare people. But they could also appear as beautiful people. This was to trick someone. A demon might appear as a handsome knight or a lovely maiden. This was to lure people into sin. The link between demons and magic was also strong. Any form of magic that was not sanctioned by the church was suspicious. It was often believed to be powered by demons. People who practiced certain types of magic were thought to be working with demons. This laid some groundwork for later ideas about witchcraft. While full-blown witch hunts were more a later phenomenon, the idea of people gaining power from evil spirits was present in the medieval mind. It was a dark and dangerous path, one that led directly to damnation. So, demons were intelligent, deceptive, and varied in their approach. They could tempt, possess, seduce, and make pacts. They could take many forms. Their methods were designed to exploit human weakness. Their goal was always the same: to corrupt souls and turn them away from God. Medieval people did not just fear demons. They also fought back. The church was their main protector. It provided many ways to defend against evil. People relied heavily on these spiritual tools. The sacraments were very important. The baptism was the first line of defense. It cleansed original sin. It brought people into the church. It gave them God's grace. This made them less vulnerable to demonic attack. The Eucharist, or Holy Communion, was also powerful. Receiving the body and blood of Christ was believed to strengthen the soul. It offered divine protection. Confession was another key sacrament. It allowed people to confess their sins. It brought forgiveness. This freed the soul from the grip of sin. Sin was seen as an open door for demons. Confession closed that door. Prayer was a constant part of life. People prayed regularly. They used specific prayers, the Lord's Prayer, the Hail Mary. These were recited often. They were believed to have power against evil. People also prayed to saints. Saints were seen as intercessors. They could ask God for protection. Many saints had stories of fighting demons. Saint Michael the Archangel was a famous demon slayer. People invoked his name for protection. Relics of saints were also highly valued. These were physical objects connected to saints. A bone fragment, a piece of clothing, a saint's personal item. People believed these relics held power. They could ward off evil. They could heal. Churches proudly displayed their relics. People would go on pilgrimages to see them. They would touch them, they believed that this offered protection from demons, other blessed objects were common. Holy water was used daily. People sprinkled it in their homes. They used it to bless themselves. The cross was a universal symbol of protection. People wore crosses. They put crosses on their walls. These were constant reminders of Christ's victory over evil. Blessed candles, blessed salt. These were also used in rituals. They kept evil away. Virtue and righteous living were the best defense. Living a good life, avoiding sin, practicing charity. These actions strengthened the soul. They made it harder for demons to tempt. A pure heart was a fortress against evil. People were taught to strive for holiness. This was not just for salvation, it was also for protection in this life. The role of saints was significant. Many saints were known for their power over demons. Saint Anthony the Great famously fought against demons in the desert. Saint Benedict established monasticism. Monks were seen as spiritual warriors. They prayed constantly. Their prayers protected the wider community. Saints offered hope. They showed that evil could be overcome. Lay piety also played a role. This was the personal devotion of ordinary people. They might have small altars in their homes. They would light candles, they would recite private prayers. Some people also used amulets. These were charms worn for protection. While some church leaders saw these as superstitious, many ordinary people used them. They were seeking any help they could get against unseen forces. In essence, medieval people believed in a constant spiritual war. They were soldiers in this war. The church provided them with their armor and weapons. Through faith, prayer, sacraments, and the intercession of saints, they believed they could withstand the attacks of demons. They could protect their souls, they could live good lives. The medieval view of demons was not static. It changed and developed over time. In the early medieval period, beliefs were often simpler. They were less systematized. Demons were generally understood as agents of evil. They were real, but their nature and methods were not always analyzed in great detail. Folk beliefs mixed with Christian doctrine. This created a rich tapestry of fears and stories. As the High Middle Ages began, scholastic theology emerged. This was a new way of thinking. Scholars started to apply logic and reason to religious questions. They wanted to understand God. They also wanted to understand evil. This led to a more systematic study of demonology. Key figures shaped these ideas. St. Augustine, though much earlier, was very influential. He wrote about the nature of evil. He explained how fallen angels became demons. His ideas laid a lot of groundwork. Later, St. Thomas Aquinas became one of the most important thinkers. He was a Dominican friar. He lived in the 13th century. He wrote extensively about angels and demons. Aquinas provided a detailed analysis. He explained that demons were indeed fallen angels. They retained their angelic intellect and will, but their will was now fixed on evil. They could not repent. He explored their powers and limitations. Demons could influence the material world. They could cause storms, they could spread disease, they could inspire bad thoughts. But they could not create. Only God could create. Demons could only corrupt what God had made. Aquinas also clarified what demons could and could not do regarding human minds. They could not know a person's thoughts directly. Only God could do that. But demons were intelligent. They could infer thoughts, they could observe actions and expressions, they could make shrewd guesses about what someone was thinking. This made their temptations very effective. They understood human nature. Crucially, Aquinas emphasized that demons were limited by God's will. They were not all-powerful, they could only act within the boundaries God allowed. Even in their evil, they served a divine purpose. They tested human faith. They sometimes even punished sin. Or God could use their evil actions to bring about good. This was a complex theological point. It offered a certain reassurance. It meant evil was not ultimately triumphant. This systematic approach to demonology was important. It moved away from just fear. It tried to understand the enemy. It gave a framework for recognizing demonic activity. It also clarified what was truly demonic versus what might be natural illness or human weakness. This was an ongoing challenge. The shift towards greater specificity continued. This laid the groundwork for later developments. These included more formalized ideas about witchcraft, and the eventual witch hunts in the late medieval and early modern periods. But during the main medieval period, the focus was on understanding demons as powerful spiritual foes. Foes who were part of God's ordered, though sometimes dark, universe. So, from simple fears and lonely forests to detailed theological treatises, the medieval view of demons evolved. It became more complex, but the core belief remained firm. Demons were real, they were evil. They were a constant threat to human souls, and understanding them was crucial for salvation. This belief deeply shaped the lives, fears, and hopes of people throughout the Middle Ages.